There was a moment in the Strongest Battlegrounds where one character made every other option feel completely pointless. Not because he was a little strong, not because he had one or two good moves, because he was doing things that should not have been possible in this game. And the wild part is that most players had no idea just how broken he actually was until it was almost too late. This is the full evolution of Gojo. And trust me, this story goes way deeper than you think. Let us go back to the beginning. When Gojo first dropped in the Strongest Battlegrounds, the reaction from the community was exactly what you would expect. Everyone lost their minds. He was Gojo. He was the most hyped character from the source material, and players had been waiting for him for a long time. But here is the thing nobody talked about back then. In those early days, Gojo was not the monster he would later become. He was strong, sure. His kit looked clean. His moves hit well. But the community had not yet figured out what was hiding inside his moveset. Then players started lab sessions. And that is where everything changed. The first major discovery was the infinity mechanic. Gojo has this passive that should theoretically block incoming damage under certain conditions. Most players knew it existed. Most players did not know how to fully exploit it in real fights. But the top players, the ones grinding matches every single day, started finding ways to use it at a level that felt unfair. They were baiting attacks, letting Infinity absorb the damage, and immediately punishing with a combo that took a huge chunk of HP. And they were doing it consistently. Not sometimes, every single fight. But that was just the beginning. The real conversation started when players discovered how his hollow purple interacted with the game's hit detection. When used at the right angle and the right distance, it was connecting in ways that felt like it should not have been possible. The hitbox was massive, the damage was serious, and if you paired it with the right setup, the opponent barely had time to react before they were already at half HP. The Strongest Battlegrounds community started calling it out in clips, in servers, in comment sections, everywhere. And then someone posted the combo. You know exactly what I am talking about if you were active in the community at this time. The full Gojo string that started with a blue pull, transitioned into a stun, and ended with a hollow purple before the opponent could even think about countering. The clip went everywhere. People were watching it and assuming it was edited or staged somehow. It was not. It was real, it was consistent, and skilled players were pulling it off in actual matches. This was the moment Gojo stopped being a strong character and started being a problem. The lobbies changed almost overnight. You went from seeing a wide variety of characters to seeing Gojo after Gojo after Gojo. Everyone was switching. Players who had mained other characters for months just dropped them completely. Why would you use anyone else when Gojo was doing what he was doing? It was not even a real question. If you wanted to win, you picked Gojo. That was the meta for a while, and it was not close. And here is the part that made it even wilder. The players who were already skilled with him before the community caught on had a massive advantage. They had weeks of practice on the combos and mechanics that everyone else was just now discovering. So while newer Gojo players were still learning the basics, these veterans were already playing at a completely different level with him. It was not just a character problem, it was a skill gap problem that the character made even worse. But nothing stays at the top forever. The developers were watching, the community was loud, videos were everywhere, forum posts, Discord servers, comment sections, everyone was talking about Gojo. Some players thought he was fine and the community was just crying about losing. Most players knew something had to change. The debate was getting intense, and then the patch notes dropped. The first round of nerfs was not subtle. They touched the Infinity passive, adjusted the timing on key moves, and reduced the effectiveness of some of the setups that were enabling the most broken combos. The community reaction was split down the middle. Some players celebrated. Some players were genuinely upset, especially the ones who had invested serious time into mastering him. And some players looked at the numbers and said the nerfs were not enough. They were right. Even after the first set of nerfs, Gojo was still top tier. He had been so far ahead that even with the adjustments, he was still stronger than most of the roster. The combos were a little harder to land. The windows were a little tighter, but skilled players adapted fast. Within days of the patch, the top Gojo players had already reworked their approaches and were still winning at a high rate. The community noticed. The conversation kept going. Then came the second wave. This one hit harder. The developers made more significant changes to how his core mechanics functioned. The hollow purple adjustments in particular changed how some of the most effective setups worked at a fundamental level. This is where you started seeing real change in the lobbies. Players who had been maining Gojo for the combo potential started moving on. The casual Gojo players, the ones who had switched purely because he was broken, dropped him almost immediately. What was left was the dedicated players who actually loved the character and were willing to put in the work to still make him viable. And here is the thing that a lot of people miss when they tell this story. Even through all of this, even through the nerfs and the adjustments and the community drama, Gojo never became a bad character. He went from being completely overpowered to being genuinely competitive, which honestly is exactly where a character like him should be. The problem was never that he was strong. The problem was that gap between where he was and where everyone else was. After the second major patch, the meta started opening up again. Other characters started appearing in high-level lobbies. Players who had been forced to use Gojo to keep up started going back to their mains. The diversity in matches came back. And the Gojo players who stuck around were now the ones who actually had to earn their wins with him, which made the character feel legitimate in a way that the broken version never really did. But here is what makes Gojo's story different from every other broken character in this game. The community never really turned on him. Think about other characters that have gone through this kind of cycle. When a character gets too strong and starts dominating, the player base usually gets bitter. People make hate posts. They celebrate every nerf. They mock anyone still playing the character. Gojo never fully got that treatment. There was frustration for sure. There were definitely players who were fed up with losing to him constantly. But the community sentiment always stayed somewhat respectful because everyone understood why he was popular. The source material, the design, the moves. He was always going to be a character people wanted to play. That is actually rare in a game like this. And it says something about how the developers handled the situation too. They did not destroy him. They did not make him unplayable. They brought him back to a reasonable level and let him exist as a strong but fair option. Where does Gojo stand today? He is still a serious character in the right hands. The players who mastered him during his prime and stuck through the nerfs are some of the most dangerous people to run into in lobbies. They know every angle, every timing, every window, because they had to relearn the character multiple times. That kind of deep knowledge does not disappear just because a patch changes some numbers. The evolution of Gojo is one of the most complete stories in the Strongest Battlegrounds history. He came in as a massive hype pick, became genuinely broken in a way that changed the entire meta, survived 2 rounds of nerfs, and ended up in a place where he is still respected and still played by the people who care about him. Not every character gets that kind of arc. So here is what I want to know. Do you think the developers handled the Gojo situation correctly, or did they overcorrect with the second set of nerfs? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one.